Type is such an important part of design and our life in general. We interact with type all the time. So there's a lot of little details that will add up to being something that you're going to be able to use to really make your stuff stand out. So with this, I'm going to kind of gloss through some of these pieces, but the essential idea, we've looked at these before when we did the retro t-shirt design with the uh, glyphs. Glyphs are every single character that's available within an individual font. Now, there are typefaces, like you would think font that you could bold and italic it. It's actually the typeface is all of these. The font is each individual style that's in here. So this is one font family that has the Roman font, the italic, bold, bold italic, condensed, ultra bold. There's a lot of others, but just kind of gloss over that. Now, there's a ton of anatomy that you're going to need to learn, and I've given you some videos with this as well. But for this part, I'm really only going to focus primarily on understanding what a ascender is, what a descender is, what a counter is, what the X height is, and what the baseline is. So just a quick review. Descenders are, actually, let's start with baseline. Baseline is where most of the bottom of the letters sit. So think about it in lined paper. It's the little blue line on your lined paper. Anything that drops below that is called a descender. The height of a lowercase letter, it will change based on the font that you're using. Some fonts have a very large lowercase letter. Some of them have a much smaller one. It's what's referred to as the X height because it's the size of a lowercase x. Anything that goes above that X height, like this portion of the B, and this primarily has to do with lowercase letters, that portion that's running up there, that is known as an ascender. So to descend is to go down, ascend is to go up, and it's all based on the X height. So a descender, whatever goes below the X height is a descender. And then the counter. A counter is any area that's enclosed with the shape. It can also be somewhat of an almost enclosed area, but primarily it's usually referred to as any enclosed empty space within a letter, like the O, the B, that portion of the A, that portion of the Q, the R. This comes into play when we convert outlines in InDesign or Illustrator. All right, let's talk about type categories. This is the part that it's varied because there are a lot of other categories than just these. In fact, if you click inside of your Adobe fonts and you go to your browse more fonts, over here on the left-hand side, Adobe has broken down their categories this way: sans serif, serif, slab serif, script, mono, and hand. Now, there's a lot of other categories than just those. And even within each of these categories, there's other categories. So I'm not going to overload you with these. The main ones that I'm looking for you to know are going to be the sans serif, serif, script, and what I'm calling decorative. Decorative is going to be any of these more kind of fancy style fonts, like these futuristic things that may have had some basis in one of these other categories, but it actually has a much more custom type of feel. So I'll show you some examples and give you a brief history of some of these. So to begin with, the old style, or what was usually referred to as a serif font, had to do with trying to repeat or replicate the hand lettering of scribes. Because when books were made before, it was all hand lettered, and it was usually hand lettered by monks over and over again, primarily the Bible. With this, a serif is this little extra foot, this little extra piece. They're lines or little extra flourishes that happen at the end of the letters. The point of that is to help aid the readability of your eye following into the next letter, into the next letter. And so this is supposed to help aid the readability in printed text. Now, there's a lot of arguments that are made that that doesn't work as well on computer screens or on your phone. And that's where, we'll skip over modern. This is another style of serif. And same with sans serif, slab serif. That's when slab serif took over. Slab serif is, or sorry, sans serif. Sans serif is when they removed the extra little feet off of the letters. This was a reaction to getting kind of bored with the idea of this old style. They want to do something much more stripped down, more geometric, more simplistic. So this was considered a bit more modern. The most modern font that came out of this that's still incredibly popular today is Helvetica. Helvetica is one of the most used and most popular fonts in the world. Even though it was made back in 1957, it's still incredibly popular. Scripted fonts come in a variety of different ways. They can look like calligraphy. It can look like handwriting. It can look, jagged. So it will really depend. This kind of style is pretty recognizable. One of the key things that you want to be careful of whenever you're using a scripted font is don't use all caps with scripted fonts. The letters themselves, especially the capital letters, are much more ornate, more decorative, and so it doesn't work well if all of the letters are the same. And then the last category that we're going to use for at least the quiz and for our beginning type categories is what I'm calling decorative or display. That's basically everything else. Every other fancy, funky, customized looking piece. This all came about because of the computer. Once we were able to have displays that could have any kind of font possible, people just went to town. Anything you find on DaFont, you're going to see a lot of stuff that is very custom lettering. It may have started with one of the sans serifs or one of the slab serifs or some of these others, but really the key thing is it's just really, really decorative. You want to make sure that you don't overuse these. I would recommend using maybe one on your document instead of having a ton of these because they start to fight and compete with each other. So the basic idea is this: serif fonts, those are the ones that have the little extra pieces at the end. Sometimes they look a little more squished or a little bit more geometric, and they've got these little thick to thin areas. Or they've got really fat, thick, heavy serifs. You're looking at, when you're trying to classify type, look at the lowercase letters, not the uppercase letters. That's a key thing. You really want to look at the lowercase letters to see. Sometimes they show up in uppercase, but sometimes they don't. The sans serif fonts, these are just essentially block letters. These are ones that are really geometric that do not have the extra little flourishes at the side. So these are some examples of sans serif. Scripted fonts, anything that looks handwritten or calligraphy usually will fall into the scripted category. And then every other custom looking one is going to be something that's going to be in your decorative or your display category. Now, there's a lot of other things that we'll talk about as we go along and start building more things like pairing things together and why there's problems and things like that. But for this coming up quiz, that's the main things that you need to know as far as the type categories are concerned.